Hey everyone, in this video we're starting a new project. We'll take what we learned using Django and React in the previous videos, and we'll build off that to make a larger project. We'll use the Django Rest Framework in Next.js, which I have the homepage for that pulled up here. And this is the open source framework that adds some extra functionality to our React front end. And so if you're familiar with React, this will be pretty easy to follow along with this. There are some nice features when using Next.js that I will get into later, but you don't need to know much about this or really too much about React, as we'll go kind of slow at the beginning through the beginner stuff and then kind of hopefully ramp it up to more advanced stuff later. But in this first video, we'll just set up the project and create a couple of basic API routes to go over the basics. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to follow this quick start for the Django Rest framework that just kind of sets up a really basic API that we can test, make sure everything's working, and we'll create a Next.js project to get into later. Okay, let's go and get started. Okay, so the first step, we're going to go ahead and set up our project. So I'll put the links to all of this in the description if you want to follow along and pull this up. But first, we go ahead and create the virtual environment and the project itself. So I'm going to get this out of the way here, and I'm going to open my terminal up, and we're going to go ahead and get started here. So the first thing we're going to do is right now I'm in this folder called tutorial, which is where I'm going to put my project. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a virtual environment. And I'm going to do this with virtual env. I have that installed here on my Linux machine, so I will use that by typing virtual env to create a virtual environment. You'll see it show up over here. Now that we have that environment created, we can go and activate it. And on Linux, and I think Mac, I'm not sure though, I think it's the same. It's source/env/bin/activate. And if you're on Windows, that will be different. So you may need to figure out what that is for you, but if you're on Linux or Mac, it should just be that. And now that we have that activated, we can go and install some packages that we'll need. So first we'll install just Django, and we'll also install the Django Rest Framework with no spaces, no anything else, just all one word like that. And we'll go ahead and install that. And for now, this is all we should need to install. We might come back later and add some more things, but just to get everything set up, that's all we'll need. So now that we have that created, I'm still within that folder here. So I'm going to go ahead now and type Django-admin and do start project. And I'm going to call this project backend because we'll have our backend and our front end, and this will help differentiate it. So we'll create a backend folder there, or a backend project there. We'll cdn the backend. And now that we're inside here, we can type Django-admin start app, and we'll call this app reviews, because in this project here, we're going to create a site where we allow users to review different products or services or places or different businesses. And so we'll create reviews here. And now we check out our file structure here. We have our backend folder. Inside of here, we have our normal URL settings inside a backend folder, and we have our app here called reviews, and just like a normal Django project. Okay, now with that set up, let's go ahead and migrate our initial changes. So we'll do Python 3 manage.py migrate. And next we'll create a super user. So Python 3 manage.py create super user. Give it an user of admin, leave that blank, we'll give it a password, and we'll go ahead and create that user. And now we have a project set up ready to go. So the first thing we do is start building a simple API. So in the Django Rest Framework, there are a couple different new concepts that you don't have for normal Django. One of these is something called serializers. And what serializers are doing, they're allowing data such as query sets and model instances and other more complicated data structures like that to be converted into like native Python data types, so different lists or dictionaries or whatever else. And then we can easily take that and convert that into JSON or XML or something else that we'll send through the API. And in our case, we're just building a REST API, so we're going to go ahead and send it as JSON, and we'll then handle that in our front end. We'll take the JSON and actually use it to display it to the user. So hopefully that makes sense. So all this is doing is converting our Django code, I guess, the query sets and the model instances and everything else we normally create in Django, taking that data and convert it into something that our front end can use. So we're going to go to create a couple serializers here to start, and this will be the serializers for the user and the groups. And this is all in the Quickstart if you want to go ahead and look there. But what we're going to do here is open up our views folder, create a new file, and we're going to save this as serializers.py. And from here, we go ahead and import the default Django group and user models. So from django.contrib.auth.models, import user and import group. There we go. Okay, now that we have that, let's go ahead and import the serializers from the REST framework. So from REST framework _ framework, import serializers. Now that we have our serializers imported and our models imported, let's go ahead and create our first serializer. So I'm going to create a class and call it user serializer. And this will inherit from hyperlinked model serializer. And inside this class here, we're going to create a class meta. So inside of our serializer class, we'll create an inner class called meta. We'll set the model equal to user, which is what we imported up there at the top. And we'll go ahead and set the fields equal to URL, username, email, and groups. So if you look at this class here, we are inheriting from this hyperlinked model serializer. And what this does, this will use a hyperlinked relation instead of our typical primary key relation that we normally use. So if that doesn't make sense, I'll show you in the API here once we get that built. But all you really need to know is that instead of using a PK, we're using a URL. And that's why we're using this hyperlinked model serializer. And if you want to, you could use a normal serializer that just has a PK field, but we're going to stick to how it's done inside of the Quickstart, and that's how they're using it here. So next, we're going to go and create another class, and we're going to call this group serializer. And this will once again will inherit from serializers.hyperlinked model serializer. And once again, we'll have a class meta. And this will be very similar. Now, instead of the model being user, we're going to put model equal group. And we're going to set the fields on this one equal to a list, the first string being URL and the second one being name. And that's it for the group. And that is it for our serializer. So this will take our Django data, convert it into Python native data, list, dictionaries, whatever. And then from there, we can easily convert it into JSON that we can send to our front end. And that will all be handled with our serializer with just a couple lines of code. So it makes it pretty easy to do this. Okay, now that we have that done, let's go ahead and jump into, I don't need this. Let's go ahead and jump into our views and create a couple of views. And instead of creating views like we normally do, we're going to create view sets. So we could always, come in here and create a class of whatever, user view, and we could inherit from something, could do a def get, a def post, and we could go to every single one, a def delete, etc. for every single HTTP request, or we can combine this all into one into a view set. So instead of having to create each method for each of the different HTTP methods that we need to handle, we can create a view set that will handle all of this for us with much less code. So I'm going to go ahead and create a user view set class, and this will inherit from view sets dot model view set. And before we go any further, we need to go ahead and import a couple things. So we don't need this render function. We do need to import our models from like we did in the views and the serializer. So we'll do from django.contrib.auth.models, import user and group. From REST framework, we also need to import our view sets. And from the REST framework, we also need to import permissions. And finally, we also want to import our serializers from the serializers.py file. So from, we'll do from reviews.serializers import user serializer, like that, and group serializer. Okay, and that's all we need to import. Next, we'll go jump back down into our user view set and set the rest of this up. So this will be an API endpoint that will allow us to, create new users, view all the users, view one user, update a user, delete a user. All those sort of functions will be handled from this user view set. And since we're using a view set, this is very easy to set up. So we can do a query set and set that equal to user.objects.all, and we're going to order them. So we do order underscore by, just like we do in all of our Django projects. And they have a field called date underscore joined on them. And we'll put a minus in front there to go newest to oldest, just like that. And so from here, what we're doing is we're grabbing all the objects and we're just going to order them newest to oldest, and that will be our query set. That'll be what we send in this view set. So when we do a get to get all the objects, it'll run this line here to get all the objects. Okay, next we add our serializer class. So do serializer underscore class and set this equal to our user serializer. And finally, we have permission classes as another option we can put on here. And we'll set that equal to a list here with permissions dot is authenticated. I'm going to go ahead and copy this now. And I'm going to paste it down here. Oops. Copy that and paste down here. I'm gonna make some changes here for a group now. So everywhere it says user, we can go ahead and just change this to group. And we'll do the same thing here, group, and group serializer. And I think that might be it. And actually, we don't need this order by on this. So in the groups, we're just grabbing all of them. We're not gonna order them. And we'll set our group serializer to the serializer class, and we'll get the same permissions here with is authenticated. And that's it for our views. That will handle all of our get, our posts, our delete, and our edits for our users and our groups. So hopefully you can see how easy it is to set this up with the Django Rest framework. Okay, now with that done, let's go ahead and create some URLs so we actually get to these views. So I'm going to go into our root URLs file here. And I'm going to go and just delete all this comment here because we don't need that. And it's going to just make things easier to read. Okay. And so now there's a few things we need to import. We don't need admin because we're not going to use that right now. But we do need to include from our Django URLs. So include. We also import something called routers. So we'll do from REST framework import routers. And we also want to import our views. So from reviews.views, import views. Now we imported this routers function from our, or I guess this routers class, I guess it would be from REST framework. And so instead of writing all the URLs ourselves, so instead of writing, one for our get, one for our create, and one for our get all, get one, etc. All different routes we need for each of the functions that our view set handles. We can use this routers.default router, and that will automatically do it for us. And all we need to do is register our view set at a URL route, and it will automatically create all the URL patterns for that view set. So what we can do here is we can do router equals routers.default router, and then we can do router.register, and we'll go ahead and make this a raw string here, and we'll pass in users, and we'll use our views.user view set, and we'll do the same thing here, so router.register and then we'll do groups. And this will be views.groupViewSet. And that is it for registering the router. Now I need to go ahead and just include it in our URL patterns. So what we'll do here is we'll actually go ahead and remove this admin, so we're not using it right now. We'll remove that, and we will do a path of just the root path, which is just an empty string. And then we'll go ahead and do include, and we'll include our router.urls, which is this .urls is just included on this router default router class here. So that's all included for us. We add it there. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and add an API auth to our REST framework URLs so we can browse this in the browsable API that we can get to at localhost 8000 once we have all this set up. So to add that, I'll go ahead and do a path, and we'll do this at API-auth, and then we'll also go ahead and include REST, so be in quotes, REST framework.urls, and we'll add a namespace equaling to REST_framework. And we'll go ahead and save that. Another thing here to mention is that if you need more control over any of this, you don't need to use this. You can go ahead and do it all manually and control anything you need to. But in most cases, we don't need to really handle anything special for a lot of our API routes. And so this just makes it much easier. This is much less code to write. And so if this is possible to use for you, this is probably the best way to go. But you can always go to, and create your own URLs for each of the HTTP methods. And you can look at the docs to figure out how to do that. And we may do that later on, but for now, we're going to keep it simple. Okay, now with that done, let's go ahead and add some basic pagination to our API. So we only want to return 10 at once. And so we're going to add some code to our settings so that it only returns a page size of 10 objects at once. And we can go ahead and just go through multiple pages to get all of our objects if there's more than 10. So to add this, what we'll do is we'll jump into our settings.py, and we'll come down to I'll put it just right here. We're going to go ahead and add, in all caps, REST_framework. And this will be equal to a dictionary. Inside the dictionary, we will have a default_pagination class. And this value will be this will not be in caps, REST_framework dot pagination dot page number pagination. Okay, I spelled it right. Page number pagination. Okay, yep, there we go. And then down here we can add our page size. And in this case, we want our page size to equal just 10. And make sure that your 10 is not in quotes. That should just be an int. Okay, and now with that done, let's go ahead and add REST framework to our installed apps. So we'll do just REST_framework. Make sure you add a comment there at the end. And that should be it for API. So let's go ahead and test it now. You could use some sort of API client like Postman. I think I have Insomnia here on my Linux machine, but using the Django Rest Framework, they have some built-in tools for you to browse it in the web browser. And that's what I'm going to do here because that seems to be a little easier. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and open a terminal. I'm going to go ahead and run Python 3 manage.py run server. And it looks like we got an error. Can't import name permissions from REST framework. So it looks like inside of our views here. Let's jump in that and check that out real quick. Oh, I forgot the I here in permissions. Let's go ahead and try that again. Looks like I did the same thing down here. And probably up here. Yeah, let's go ahead and save that now and try this again. Can I import name views from reviews.views? Oh, I put reviews.views and try to import views. I'm not sure what I was doing there. Let's just put from reviews, import views. That should fix that problem. And finally, looks like we have one more issue down here. And this include should include the namespace. So it should just be a comma here. and our namespace, and we'll close out the parentheses over here. Okay. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. We had a few issues there. So just to go over that again, make sure your includes the namespace. I closed it out early, and I just messed that up here. Don't put reviews.views import views, just from reviews import views. Okay, now with those issues fixed, let's go and open up a browser. And if you go to localhost 8000, you'll get the API root here. And what we can do here is we can jump into our different endpoints we have, and we create our users and our groups. They both show up right here. So we were to come here into our users, you'll see this detail authentication credentials were not provided. That's because we required them to be authenticated inside of our API and our views, requiring them to be authenticated to access them. And so we can't do that here without being logged in. So inside of the Browsewell API, there's a login button at the top. I can click that, and it takes me to this page here where I can log in. So I'm going to go log in with my admin account that I created earlier. And now that I'm logged in, you'll see we have this extra field available to make a post request. We can also come up here to the top. We have an options, and we also have a get right here as well. And this get will do a get on the localhost 8000 localhost port 8000/users, so we'll get all of the users created. Let's go and add a user real quick. So we'll add a test user. Add a test. And we'll add an email there. We don't have any groups yet, so we're gonna leave that blank. We're gonna hit post. And you'll see now we have our fields here. So since we used the hyperlinked, what was it? It was the, I forget what it was, hyperlinked model serializer. So since we used the hyperlinked model serializer, we have this URL field. And that points to the path here, which is localhost 8000/users/2. And this is the primary key /2. So instead of having a PK2, we have the whole path here with the primary key appended to the end. And we also can go ahead and do an update here. We can do a get up here. If we were to go to this user, if we click on the link here, we'll have a option to delete it as well. And so using that view set, we have our ability to update, delete, get it, make a new one, get all of them, all the normal functions you need. So that's working well. Let's go ahead and jump into our groups here and make a group real quick. And since we're logged in, we can go and make one. So I'll just do a test group and do a post on that. And it creates a group here. And we can go here, go to that group again here. We have our delete, our options, our get, our put to update it. We have back here a post to create one and a get to get all of them. So this is all working pretty good. Let's go ahead and just add the group to that user just to double check that's working. So we'll click on that and hit, or actually we'll go to our user, our test user, and where it says put, we know we're updating it. So we'll add them to the test group and do put. And the group, they're added to the group. So you see the whole path for that group show up down here inside this group's list. Okay, so our API is working pretty good. And that is all we need to do to set up a really basic API. All we need to do is set up a serializers, our views, and to set up the URLs. And later we'll add models and those sorts of things to create data. But for now, that's all we're going to do for our API. So hopefully that made sense. That's just a quick overview and a quick setup for our API. Before we end this video, I'm going to go ahead and create the front end, but I'm not going to do anything with it yet. So let's go ahead and just create a Next.js project. And so to do this, I'm going to go and stop the server here. You're going to need to have Node installed. So if you do, I think it's Node-V, you'll see if you do Node-V, you'll see the version of Node that you're running. If this doesn't work, then you need to install Node. And you can do that by just, just doing a Google search for Node, and it's pretty easy to install that way. But once we're here and this is installed, we can go ahead and run an npx create -next-app, and we'll give a name of frontend. And actually, I'm going to cancel that. So right now I'm still in my backend, so I'm gonna cd upload directory and run that command again. So npx create next app frontend. It'll say, do you need to install this package? Yes, go ahead and install it. And then it will go ahead and install everything we need to run a Next.js project. Okay, and now with that done, we can go ahead and look inside of our tutorial folder. We have this front end folder here. Now there's a lot here. I'll go over this in a future video. I'm not going to do that right now. But this is where our Next.js project, our Next.js project will look like. And now just to test everything, I'm going to go ahead and open up a browser. And I'm going to go to localhost port 3000. And back inside of the Sublime Text, or inside my terminal here, if I go ahead and cd into frontend, I can run npm run dev to run the development server for Next.js. And you'll see here, started server on port 3000, localhost 3000. So we know that's going, that goes to this page here. I'm going to load the page here, and you'll get the starter code for Next.js. So if you get this page, you know everything here is working well. And that is where we'll stop for today. So now we have our front end and our back end kind of set up, and we have a couple basic API endpoints set up there as well. So in the next videos, we'll go ahead and build a more in-depth API. We'll also come into this Next.js here front end and build a simple front end to interact with the API that we created. So I'll put all the code will be in the description below, as well as links to docs to both Next.js and Django Rest Framework if you want to take a look at that. But that is it. We'll be back again soon to make another video for this. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.